Good day, or at least I'm alive, so it's a good day that I'm still breathing. It is October 11th, 2024, Common Era, ERA/epoch, EPOCH, a time period. There are some in Eastern Europe that say the Roman Catholic Church added 300 to 500 years to the calendar. 300 to 500 years to the calendar. Some were saying in the 70s that the real REAL, William Shakespeare, was alive. If that was him, he went undercover for MI5, 6, 7, and 8 to investigate English, the English language, which is poor for spirituality and history. The English language is a very bad language for communication because of a few words that the media keeps using the way they do. A few of these words are war, race, black, white. Words that end with ism and ist and ish. A Semite is a genetic stock that can be tested in DNA. The people that are anti-Semite are the ones that are murdering the people that live in an area essentially that was called Stone Palace in the Levant, Arabian Peninsula, that are Israelite descent. Some converted to Christianity, some converted to Islam. Some of the Israelites are the original faith of Adamite. Adamite are the descendants of Adam. Shem, Noah's son. Shemites are the descendant of Noah's son, Shem. Anyone saying something different is twisting reality and twisting the meanings of ancient concepts to suit their future world domination plans. That was my egg going boom in there. That's my egg popping off, exploding, going boom, boom, boom. My egg is popping off. Oh, look at that. About that word devil, I'm suspect of its meaning in English. Here's the thing. You have a Judo-Christian world. It says the devil is the evil one, right? But then they have in the Bible, they also have Satan and Lucifer. There's a debate on which one's which. But I know from talking to a lot of people, the devil is a bastardization or corruption of the word diva. The devo, which is God in Hindi and Sanskrit. So are devils evil? Or devil, a word being used to genocide, right off, get rid of certain spiritual beliefs? If Satan is the proper word for Christianity, it's Satan, not devil. What the confusion? A bishop once said, you should always learn spirituality in the language it was written.
From New York,
Not in the language it was translated.
What we are asking you now is please, please stay inside. Stay inside until we can get out there with our teams. They are all in action right now. We can get out there, assess the damage, and make sure that it's safe for you to go back out into your community or to re-enter your neighborhood. Residents in Florida are being urged to stay inside after Hurricane Milton swept across the state, triggering deadly tornadoes, flooding, and record rainfall. In St. Petersburg, the roof was ripped off Tropicana Field, the home of the Tampa Bay Rays baseball team. The storm came just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene hit Florida and other southeastern states, killing over 230 people. We'll go to St. Petersburg, Florida, which experienced a 1-in-1,000-year rainstorm, and also look at how the back-to-back storms have impacted prisoners and farm workers in Florida. Plus, we'll look at how the climate crisis is fueling stronger and deadlier storms.
Coronal mass ejections they don't want to admit.
They're becoming ever more frequent, and with Helene and Milton hitting Florida twice in 2 weeks, it's just a reminder that for all of the happy talk about renewables and all the political debate about the green transition, the big story really is climate change. It's accelerating, and its impacts are going to be getting much worse.
All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In Gaza, an Israeli air attack on a school-turned-shelter in central Deir al-Balah killed at least 28 people. Reporters describe chaotic scenes at Al-Aqsa Hospital where victims, most of them women and children, are being treated. Meanwhile, Israel's escalating its bloody siege on northern Gaza. Doctors at 3 hospitals are struggling to care for patients after Israel ordered their evacuation. Al Jazeera reports Israeli ground troops have surrounded Kamal Adwan Hospital in Beit Lahia and are threatening staff and patients. Israel also ordered the evacuation of Al-Auda and Indonesian hospitals.
More combat field crimes on behalf of the IDF, eh?
Newborn babies from Kamal Adwan Hospital, but that ambulances are being detained
Humanitarian
at military
disaster
checkpoints as they attempt
all
to
across
reach Gaza
North
City.
Africa
The
and
humanitarian
Arabia
group warned,
because of
quote,
Zionists.
"The world must act before Gaza is erased entirely," unquote. The World Health Organization also
Zionists
said
that
it
might
was
be freaking
prevented by
Nazis that
Israel
pretended
yesterday from carrying
Zionists,
out the forced
some
evacuations.
Zionists might have been Nazis that escaped Germany and hid in Israel pretending to be freaking one with the Jews. That's why Israelis don't identify as Israelite. Think about it.
Famine, unquote, as a result of Israel's latest siege on northern Gaza. Israel's attacks on journalists continue as well. On Wednesday, an airstrike on the Jabalia refugee camp killed Al-Aqsa cameraman Mohammed Al-Thanani and injured the reporter Tamer Labad.
An Al Jazeera Arabic camera operator, Fadi Al-Hidi, was also injured while covering attacks on Jabalia, shot in the neck by an Israeli quadcopter. This is his colleague, journalist Anas Al-Sharif, detailing the attack.
Suddenly, a quadcopter drone appeared above the broadcast vehicle and the place where we were, and it started firing directly at us, at the broadcast vehicle, and at the colleagues and team who were with me. My colleague Fadi was next to me, so we started running. As soon as we began to run from the location, the drone started chasing us and the entire crew, firing directly at us. A bullet hit my colleague Fadi's neck directly, and he immediately passed out and fell to the ground.
Another Al Jazeera cameraman, Ali Al-Attar, also remains in critical condition after being shot earlier this week while reporting in Deir al-Balah. In Khan Yunis, Israel killed at least 5 members of the same family, 3 of them children, including a 7-month-old baby. This comes as a new report by the International Rescue Committee reveals over 50,000 Palestinian children in Gaza have been orphaned or separated from their parents over the past year. Israeli attacks on the occupied West Bank are also ongoing, killing at least 5 Palestinians Wednesday, including the leader of the group Al-Aqsa Martyrs Brigade in Nablus. Separately, new UN data show there was an average of 4 incidents of settler violence every day against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank since October 7th last year. Israel bombardment of southern Lebanon killed 5 paramedics Wednesday. Israel has killed at least 115 health workers in Lebanon over the past several weeks. The UN Special Coordinator for Lebanon called for an immediate halt to attacks to create space for a political solution.
The joint call for a 21-day ceasefire as launched by the U.S. or led by the U.S. and France, I think is still on the table and very relevant. So we should not dismiss it. I don't think that new initiatives will add to it. I mean, the many appeals and calls for ceasefire are crystal clear. We need a window for diplomatic efforts to succeed.
Over 1 million people in Lebanon have been displaced since Israel launched its deadly campaign.
I've been here from the south for 8 days. I sent my family 2 to 3 days before me. My wife gave birth, so I came here for my family. I will go back south again. We will not leave our land. It is an expensive land. We're offering martyrs. We're offering blood.
Israel has also launched more strikes in Syria targeting Homs and Hama provinces. Meanwhile, Israel is expected to launch an imminent attack on Iran after Tehran struck Israeli military bases with ballistic missiles October 1st. Iran's attacks, which targeted Israeli security sites, came amidst Israel's escalating attacks and acts of terror against Lebanon and after its assassination of the Hezbollah leader Hassan Nasrallah. This is Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant.
Whoever attacks us will be hurt and will pay a price. Our attack will be deadly, precise, and above all, surprising. They will not understand what happened and how it happened.
On Wednesday, President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris spoke on the phone with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in their first call in nearly 2 months. A White House readout of the call highlights Biden's statement of his ironclad support for Israel. It makes no mention of ceasefire. More than 3 million customers in Florida are without power after Hurricane Milton made landfall in Sarasota County Wednesday evening as a Category 3 storm with 120-mile-an-hour winds. Multiple deaths were confirmed after tornadoes tore through a senior center in Fort Pierce. 116 tornado warnings were issued across Florida Wednesday. In St. Petersburg, the storm ripped the roof off of Tropicana Field, the home of the Tampa Bay Rays baseball team. A massive crane also collapsed in downtown St. Petersburg. Ahead of making landfall, President Biden warned Milton could be the storm of the century. Tampa's mayor called the scale of evacuation unprecedented. Milton comes just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene battered Florida and other southeastern states, killing at least 230 people. A new analysis by the group World Weather Attribution finds the burning of fossil fuels has made highly destructive storms like Helene more than twice as likely. Florida climate activists have declared Republican Governor Ron DeSantis unfit to lead the state since his policies promote fossil fuels, reject sustainable energy options, and ignore the climate crisis. Meanwhile, officials, including Florida Republicans, are working to combat misinformation about the storms pushed by their fellow Republicans, including the recent assertion by the far-right Georgia's Congress member Marjorie Taylor Greene that the government is controlling the weather.
The government is not controlling the weather.
Hurricane Milton.
What the fuck?
A new report by the Worldwide Fund for Nature reveals wildlife populations have declined by over 70% on average over the past half-century. The Living Planet report warns key habitats like the Amazon are reaching tipping points with catastrophic consequences for many species. This is Dr. Robin Freeman from the Zoological Society of London, which produces the Living Planet Index.
This year's Living Planet report is the most comprehensive data set we've collected to date. We've got almost 35,000 populations of 5,400 species, and using that data set, we've estimated that populations have declined by an average of 73% since 1972. The combination of climate change, habitat loss, and biodiversity loss are things that we need to get on top of because they're mixed up problems that need to be dealt with together.
The report comes just 10 days before the next major UN biodiversity conference, dubbed COP16, is set to begin in Cali, Colombia. A new report from Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse confirms then-President Trump significantly curtailed the FBI's 2018 investigation into Brett Kavanaugh as his confirmation to become a Supreme Court justice hung in the balance. After Christine Blasey Ford testified that Kavanaugh had sexually assaulted her at a party when they were high school students, Trump approved a one-week-long FBI investigation into the allegations amidst a public uproar over Kavanaugh's nomination. But despite claims by Trump the FBI had free rein in their probe, his staff ordered the FBI to only interview 10 witnesses and not to pursue the many tips or offers of corroborating evidence the agency received. Lawyers for Blasey Ford said the report confirmed the 2018 investigation was a, quote, sham effort directed by the Trump White House to silence brave victims, unquote. Talks between Boeing and some 33,000 striking workers in the Pacific Northwest have collapsed, with Boeing rescinding a 30% pay increase offer earlier this week. The International Association of Machinists and Aerospace Workers, which launched the strike nearly a month ago, is seeking a 40% pay raise and improved retirement benefits. This comes as the Federal Aviation Administration this week issued a safety warning to airlines related to the rudders of some Boeing 737 airplanes. Meanwhile, the New York Times is reporting Boeing declined a request by Ethiopia Airlines chief pilot to provide guidance on how to handle problems with the 737 MAX flight control system in the wake of 2018's Lion Air crash in Indonesia. 3 months after the denied request, an Ethiopia Airlines crashed from the same flawed flight control system, killing all 157 people on board. This year's Nobel Prize for Literature has been awarded to the South Korean author Han Kang, quote, for her intense poetic prose that confronts historical traumas and exposes the fragility of human life, unquote. Han Kang, author of The Vegetarian and The White Book, is the first South Korean author and just the 18th woman to win the prestigious award since it was inaugurated in 1901. And in a blow to the student Palestinian solidarity movement, Brown University voted against divesting from 10 companies that are complicit in Israel's occupation of and war on Palestinian territories. In a social media post condemning the news, the Brown Divest Coalition warned, quote, all settler colonial institutions will fail, unquote. Students across the country are marking a week of rage with die-ins, walkouts, and other actions to protest 1 year of genocide in Gaza and Israel's escalating war on Lebanon. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. More than 3 million people in Florida are without power after Hurricane Milton made landfall in Sarasota County Wednesday as a Category 3 storm with 120-mile-an-hour winds. The storm came just 2 weeks after Hurricane Helene battered Florida and other southeastern states, killing at least 230 people, making it one of the deadliest storms in the last decades. Officials in Florida have just begun assessing the damage caused by Hurricane Milton, from wind damage to flash flooding. Multiple deaths were confirmed after tornadoes tore through a senior center in Fort Pierce. Overall, 116 tornado warnings were issued across Florida Wednesday. In St. Petersburg, the storm ripped off the roof of Tropicana Field, the home of the Tampa Bay Rays baseball team. A massive crane also collapsed in downtown St. Petersburg, where more than 9 inches of rain fell in just 3 hours. CNN described it as a 1-in-1,000-year rainstorm. Earlier this morning, Tampa Mayor Jane Castor urged residents to stay inside.
What we are asking you now is please, please stay inside. Stay inside until we can get out there with our teams. They are all in action right now. We can get out there, assess the damage, and make sure that it's safe for you to go back out into your community or to re-enter your neighborhood.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.
Well, we begin today's show in St. Petersburg, where we're joined on the phone by Florida State Representative Michelle Rayner, who's among the millions who lost power in the storm. State Representative Rayner, welcome back to Democracy Now! I'm sorry it's under these circumstances. I know you've moved from one place to another. St. Petersburg has experienced a 1-in-1,000-year rainstorm. Can you describe, as the sun comes up, what you see and the devastation, and then link it to the kind of help that is being offered and what the governor is saying of Florida, DeSantis?
Thank you so much, Amy, and I'm glad to be back. Definitely not under these circumstances. And can y'all hear me okay, by the way?
We hear you perfectly, and I should explain to our listeners and viewers that usually we have you on screen, but because you've lost electricity, we just have you on the phone. Go ahead.
Correct. So, we have no power. There's no internet right now. There's also no ability to use water. So the water has been shut down here. I evacuated my home, which is in evacuation zone B over by a lake in St. Petersburg. I came more inland into St. Petersburg, but I'm still here. I walked out of my best friend's home, and trees and limbs are down here. The reports I've been getting from county and city officials, as you mentioned in the intro, the Tropicana Field top was blown off. Cranes have been knocked into other buildings. There has been flooding. I was born and raised in Pinellas County. I have lived here off and on my whole life. I have never experienced a storm quite like this. It is disheartening. I don't even know what my own home looks like right now, so I can't even get there to see what that looks like. As far as the help that the governor is proposing, right now everything is up in the air. We don't know. I'm concerned because he was already ahead of the storm, playing political games, not taking phone calls from Vice President Kamala Harris, making this political members of his party spreading disinformation around FEMA, and
this is just not the time. This is not the time for these type of games. This is not the time for these type of shenanigans. It's just not. We have people, we don't know what the loss of life looks like right now. We have people that were devastated by Helene that now have the double trauma of Milton, who lost everything in Helene, who now probably have lost maybe even more. So I am hopeful that all of us will work together and put, aside these games. But it is, I also know who I'm dealing with. So I'm hopeful that we would be able to do that. I mean, and the reason I say I know who I'm dealing with, last 2 weeks ago when Helene ripped into Florida, I had the idea for the state to lift the moratorium to lift the bans on short-term rental, because here in the state of Florida, you can only have a short-term rental for about 14 days. And I had the idea for the state to lift that and say, lift the bans on the short-term rentals. I knew that I couldn't call the governor. I knew that if I tweeted it, I knew if I sent a letter about it, I knew he would immediately not even entertain it. So I had to have other people serve as intermediaries and give him this idea so he would think that it was his idea in order for him to do that. So I know who I'm dealing with.
And Representative Ringer, I'm wondering the evacuation of more than 5 million people. This was the largest in Florida history. How did that go? And what about these reports that there was a price gouging at many gas stations?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I live near, a major interstate that gets you out of Florida or gets you down south, and it was gridlocked. My best friend, whose house I'm staying at, her and her wife, they drove to Miami. Miami is maybe a 3.5 hour drive. It took them 6 hours to get there, right? And we have seen price gouging not only of hotels, but Airbnbs, of gas,
Fucking faggots, man. Sorry.
People,
the word. That's an old English term. Faggots. Price gouging? Taking faggots do. Stealing from people? Faggots. Has nothing to do with sexuality. The term used to mean someone that drags things down. Fag.
I also wanted to ask you about the rumors that are going around. I mean,
not
I should say the
good
lies
guy to female.
of people like
Males that
Marjorie
treat
Taylor Greene,
females
but it
badly.
goes beyond her state in Georgia, says that the government
Fag.
is manipulating the weather, the denial of
Males that are
climate change,
insufficient,
and also
don't do
that
well,
FEMA will
always
not
mess
be
things up.
providing money, and how
Fag.
this can be a life and death
That's the old
situation.
English
It's not
term.
just misinformation,
Old Navy
but if
term
people believe
for
this,
fag.
how you're dealing
they
with
say
this in
fag,
Florida, State
it
Representative.
means a person is messing up
So
people.
right now,
person that's
a
no
lot
good.
of us are in
That's what it used to mean. It's nothing sexual. It doesn't mean same-gender sexual relationship.
State Representative Michelle Rayner.
That is
she was just speaking to us on the phone.
buggery.
Yes, go ahead. Your answer.
Same-gendered
State Representative.
sexual relationship.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can
Idris
hear you.
Elba said it in
I
the
know
movie.
this is a tough
Buggery.
situation.
Don't bugger each other.
Yeah,
Don't
it is.
have a
So I give
male
kudos to our city and county partners.
sexual interaction.
And state officials. We are
When it's done as sexual assault,
videos, we are releasing information
it's
on
called
social
sodomy.
media. We
So you're sexually
are
assaulted
making sure that our
in the
constituents
rectum,
know that that's
the anus,
patently not
it's
true.
called sodomy.
That no one's coming to take your house. That if you apply for any FEMA funding, that has nothing
people
to do
do
with
behind closed doors,
taking your
if they
home
love
or
and
any
care
of these
about
things
each other,
that have been
the law
have
is
been,
not involved in that.
falsely, put
If
out
someone
there.
violently attacks
and
someone
so it's really just us providing that information to
and
people.
buggeries them,
I know
buggers
that
them,
we're going to have teams
and they
of
didn't want
folks
it,
going door to door.
that is
letting
sodomy
people
under the
know
law.
about
It's
what
sexual
is
assault.
available to them in this time, not only on the city, county, and state, but also federal level. But once again, these
I ain't
are
a
people
buggerer.
that spread these lies. It is
I want to
just
liberate
completely not the time, and it's
ancient
heartbreaking.
meaning.
I mean, people have already lost
That
so
sound
much.
part in
They've already lost so much.
gay
Why would you do
for
this
all
in this time?
languages
Why would you
to
do
use
this
it
in the
in
time
the
where
proper
people
way
need help?
instead of being
These cost
forced
money,
into
people.
gay
Why would you
means
do this?
same-gendered
It-
sexual relationship. I'm I'm speaking over her broadcast.
You're breaking up, State
flow just came
Representative
right
Michelle
now.
Rayner, but we thank you so much for being with us, and we're going to check back with
I've
you.
always been talking about the water in the
as the
last few
sun
years.
just comes up in Florida right now,
And something
Democratic
odd might have
Florida
happened to
State
me.
Representative.
Like in the movie
We're going
Abyss.
to break, and when we come back, we're
Unless
going to
I was
go to
dreaming
another
it.
hard-hit Florida city,
scientific
to
evaluation,
Orlando, to talk with a student
what I
there
saw and heard in the bathroom
engaged in climate change
could not have
activism.
happened
His
less than
dorm
10
is being
minutes
used as a shelter
after the water
as
was
we
turned
speak.
off.
Stay with us.
And I was sleeping for at least 4 to 5 hours when that sound happened. So it's possible, a column of water came out of a pipe and attached itself to my nose to have me remember something. And that's only happened once that I recall about. Water is life. Clean water. Petroleum we use, crude petroleum, turned to fuel, is not as clean as plants, flora, flowers, grass, tree leaves that fall in the autumn, being collected and turned into fuel. It's cleaner than petroleum. The petroleum in the air causes disability to a lot of people. The petroleum was not said to cause global warming, though it does cause illness and disabilities. We had said global warming, W-A-R-N, about the sun and its coronal mass ejections, affects and effects on the earth when the coronal mass ejection hits the earth.
We tried
This
by
week,
Louise Harris,
it
a
seems
musician and climate activist.
The Aurora Borealis
This is Democracy Now!,
might have been seen in Texas, which is a sign
I'm Amy
those
Goodman with Juan
hurricanes
Gonzalez.
were intensified
Hurricane Milton
by
comes just
coronal
2
mass
weeks after
ejection
Hurricane Helene battered
that is
Florida and other
neglected
southeastern
by the
states, killing at least
science
230
that runs
people.
the media
New analysis by the group
compared
World
to
Weather Attribution finds
poli-science
the burning of fossil
and real
fuels has made
peer-reviewed
highly
science
destructive
that
storms
is not
like Helene
talked
more
about
than twice as
in the
likely.
media.
Florida climate activists have declared Republican Governor Ron DeSantis unfit to lead the state since his policies promote fossil fuels, reject sustainable energy options, and ignore or deny the climate crisis. We're joined now by two guests. In our New York studio, David Wallace Wells is with us, New York Times opinion writer, columnist for the New York Times Magazine. His recent piece is headlined Sleeping Through Hurricane Helene,
today
author of the book The Uninhabitable
That's my
Earth.
commentary
But we're going
of
first to
Democracy
Manuel
Now! From
Ivan
yesterday
Guerrero, an
on
18-year-old
Instagram,
freshman at the
if it works out
University
that
of
way.
Central Florida,
If not,
UCF.
it would
He's
just
an
be one to
organizer with the
Instagram,
Sunrise
or one
Movement,
to
helping
YouTube.
with Hurricane Rapid Response,
posterity,
and has just called on
humanity to
major
know.
TV networks to hold a climate hurricane town hall with the presidential candidates Kamala Harris and Donald Trump on October 17th, the day early voting begins in the swing state of North Carolina, parts of which were just devastated by Hurricane Helene. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Let's begin in Orlando with Manuel. Describe what the situation is right there, Manuel, and where you're living, the number of people who had to evacuate, how intense the rain was, and what you're calling for.
Hi, Amy. Thank you for having me. And the situation here at UCF is honestly a lot better than the rest of the city of Orlando. There's footage and there's stuff from the off-campus housing near UCF and downtown Orlando of trees falling down and buildings that are still without power at this time, even as the hurricane left 6-7 hours ago. And in general, Orlando is in a much better position than Tampa due to not being on the coast, but it's still really, really nowhere near where it should be. And honestly, this just has me more scared for what the future is going to look like in Florida and how the landscape of Florida is going to look like 10, 15 years from now when we're having these 1,000-year storms every 3-4 years now. And we're definitely extremely concerned about the way that it's going to affect our community and the people that haven't been able to evacuate. Many people weren't able to evacuate either for economic reasons or because of shortages. People aren't able to evacuate from 2 storms back to back in this way. When you can't afford rent, you can't really afford to buy $300 of gas money and then a hotel somewhere you've never been to before. And what we're really fighting for is to make the Biden-Harris administration focus on this as a climate issue and to make it a top 3 priority for them in this coming election, because we need a candidate that's really fighting for climate. And that's why we're calling for this hurricane town hall, specifically in North Carolina, probably the most affected state by hurricanes at the moment, a state in cities that 10 years ago would have been unimaginable to have flooding in Asheville. And that destruction that we saw in Asheville and the destruction that now we're seeing in Tampa and in downtown Orlando are things that we really should not be seeing at the moment. Things that are completely unprecedented levels of damage. And the way that this hurricane intensified 3-4 categories in 12-15 hours is unprecedented, and we should really be focused on that.
And Manuel, can you talk about the situation where Florida, which has been ravaged for decades by major hurricanes, but increasingly has become a danger zone for climate change, having a governor who's a climate crisis denier?
Honestly, with the leadership that we have in Florida right now, they don't listen to the needs of Floridians. We are at the front line of the climate crisis, and all they focus on is the crisis in the moment of the hurricane and not the root cause. It's like Ron DeSantis sent garbage trucks to Tampa last week to pick up trash before Hurricane Milton and due to the debris from Hurricane Helene. Yet he refuses to see the fact that climate change is the cause for this, and we know this for a fact. And we can see the way that fossil fuels are causing these issues, and we can see the intensification and the heat that's causing all of this to happen. And the way that we've been even Republican leadership in the state that has recognized the fact that the climate change does exist, as Rick Scott said 2 weeks ago after Hurricane Helene, they still refuse to recognize the reason that the climate is changing, and that is the fossil fuel investment that we have in the state of Florida, and the focus that we have on fossil fuels and the fossil fuel lobby that exists so deeply within the state.
I just wanted to play a clip from the Republican presidential debate last year. All 8 participants declined to raise their hands when asked by Fox News moderator Martha McCallum if human activity is to blame for the climate crisis. This is how Florida Governor Rick DeSantis responded.
Do you believe in human behavior is causing climate change? Raise your hand if you do.
Well, look, we're not school children. Let's have the debate. I mean, I'm happy to take it to start. Alexander, so do you want to raise your hand? I don't think that's the way to do.
So, David Wallace-Wells, if you can respond. I mean, we're talking about a state where the governor, many have described as a major climate denier. What this means, and, emblematic of many in the country.
Yeah, I think the story is much bigger than Ron DeSantis. I mean, we're talking about, Donald Trump campaigning in part on Project 25's promises to defund FEMA and cut emergency services and disaster response. We are seeing all of this disinformation surrounding Hurricane Helene, with people posting on social media about FEMA helicopters shooting down disaster relief, people circulating conspiracy theories about land being seized by the federal government, not to mention, as you highlighted earlier, Marjorie Taylor Greene's suggestion that the weather itself is man-made and controlled by the government. There's a kind of a grim irony in those who deny that human activity can be driving the climate crisis, but who believe that government actors can control the weather to this scale. I think we're entering into a really dark new phase, reckoning with the climate crisis when, 10 or 15 years ago, climate activists would have told you when the stuff really starts to hit the fan, people are going to wake up. But I think what we've seen over the last few weeks shows us, unfortunately, that when the stuff's hitting the fan, many people are choosing instead to retreat into little cocoons of disinformation and paranoia. And that scares me in some ways even more than the weather itself.
And David Wallace-Wells, what's the estimated cost of damages from these hurricanes? You've noted that the costs may well exceed the total green investment in the U.S. for the year.
Yeah, well, the damages for Hurricane Milton, we still don't know. It seems likely to be a less damaging storm than people feared a few days ago because of the path, and that's a reminder of just how precarious all of this is. A storm moves 10 or 20 miles in one direction, and it can go from being a $100 billion disaster to being a $5 billion disaster. That's how much we are already living on the knife's edge. But we have pretty good preliminary estimates for the damages from Hurricane Helene, and those are at the moment about $175 billion. That is an enormous number, and to put it into context, the Congressional Budget Office estimates that the total green spending contained in the Inflation Reduction Act, which we're celebrating rightly as the biggest climate investment in American history, the total green investment there, the Congressional Budget Office has estimated as $369 billion, and that's over a 10-year time period. This one storm, Hurricane Helene, delivered almost half of the damage that the IRA has been estimated to pay out in green outlays. And I think there's an even bigger context to understand there too, which is a storm that hit Nepal simultaneously with Hurricane Helene here in the U.S. that killed also 200 people and devastated the country of Nepal. The damage there was estimated at only $175 million, which is to say that storms of incredible catastrophic impact around the world are tallied as unbelievably trivial compared to the damage in the U.S., not because the storm itself was less intense, not because the loss of life was any less severe, not because the damage was any less grim, but just because when we tally these things in dollars, we actually value the lives and the property of people living elsewhere in the world dramatically less than we value the lives and property of people living in the U.S. In fact, that differential is 1,000-fold differential between the way that we calculate the damage of Hurricane Helene and the way that we calculated the damage from the flooding in Nepal. That is grotesque. It is on some level natural that Americans experience a form of climate narcissism and focus on what's happening in their backyard, but I think it's always important to take the global picture and see how much worse those living elsewhere in the world with many less resources to respond and to adapt than we have are suffering even more intensely than we are here in the U.S.
To follow up on that global perspective, in the last months we've seen the Typhoon Babinka in China, extreme monsoons in India, and heat waves across the Mediterranean, and many of these countries have less resources, as you mentioned, to deal with them. Yet the American public is almost unaware of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned the flooding in Nepal, but at the same time as that was happening, there was also a hurricane hitting Acapulco. That was the second major hurricane to hit Acapulco in a year. The one that hit last summer was perhaps the most dramatic hurricane that we've seen in the age of climate crisis. This was a hurricane that intensified from a pretty quotidian tropical storm to a Category 5 monster in the space of 24 hours. And unlike Hurricane Milton, which was projected to intensify over the course of that period, meteorologists who were looking at the Hurricane Otis in Acapulco were completely taken by surprise, which meant that last year that city was almost unable to evacuate. They had so little warning ahead of the storm. They had a similar deluge 2 weeks ago as we were watching Hurricane Helene, and that's a city that is now again underwater for the second time in 2 years. So, these are storms that seem to demand our full attention when we look at any one of them, and yet there are often multiple of them going on around the world at any one time, which is just another mark of what a different universe of climate impacts and global warming we're living in now, already entirely outside the window of temperatures that enclose human history. We are running an experiment, a dangerous experiment, to see how much of the human civilization we've brought with us to this point can survive these new climate conditions, and we're going to be finding out the answer to that question in the coming decades, unfortunately.
Relating to this issue of what happens in the rest of the world and how little we pay attention, comes the issue of what we do in this country, how we build the this country as one of the leading climate change, sadly, promoters in the world, the causes of climate change, this country, the United States. There's a new research paper finding that in the months after a hurricane landfall, communities experienced between, 7 and 11,000 excess deaths, far above the official estimates. In what way? And why is insurance an important driver of what should actually be sustainable development?
Yeah, the paper about hurricane mortality is really eyebrow-raising and harrowing, and it's just been published, and some scientists are still looking at the data, trying to figure out exactly what's going on there. But the basic story is that when a major hurricane hits, everything is disrupted. Medical services are disrupted, power goes out, people's lives are interrupted, and those can have knock-on effects, especially in dense communities where vulnerable people ultimately succumb to things that they would have been able to survive in other contexts. This impact, the researchers of this and the authors of this paper suggest, could account for as much as 5% of total deaths in these areas just from the hurricanes that we're seeing. It's a quite grim reminder of just how deadly all of these storms can be. We've gotten much better at evacuating, as the evacuations in Florida this week show, but we're still not protecting people nearly enough. And that goes for the direct mortality impacts. It also goes for the longer-term impacts on lives and livelihood, and that's, I think, where the insurance question comes in. Over the last few years, we've seen historic losses across the insurance business, driven in part by climate change. And in places like Florida and California, it's really becoming quite unclear who will be protecting those who need protection. If your house is flooded or destroyed, who will help you rebuild? In North Carolina, we saw the intense center of Hurricane Helene flooding, Asheville and its county, Bonneville County. Less than 1% of the homes in that county carry flood insurance. Less than 1%. Many of these homes were literally destroyed. Many more of them were damaged considerably. And many of those people living there will have absolutely nowhere to turn for help. They're not people living in Malibu who have, millions of dollars to spend on a new house after a wildfire. These are people who are quite vulnerable, and both the private insurance system and the federal flood insurance system have very, very little to offer them. I think what we're being told by these disasters is that we need to do much, much more to protect people in harm's way, and that many more people are really in harm's way than we thought just even a few years ago.
And David, I wanted to ask you, you mentioned earlier Project 2025. With this presidential election less than a month away and a very close race, what are your concerns about how a potential Trump presidency would deal with the issue of climate?
Well, I'm glad to be here talking about it today because I actually think a lot of the green energy transition stuff that has been going on in the aftermath of the IRA will probably continue because the political logic of the green investment boom in places like Texas is somewhat undeniable. We're probably going to continue building out green energy somewhat rapidly. But on the adaptation and disaster management side, I'm really, really quite concerned. In Project 2025, they call for the privatization of the hurricane forecasting system, which would mean you'd have to pay for good information about where hurricanes were coming.
What?
Donald Trump, when he was
that
last
makes no
president,
sense to disaster preparedness.
By as much
that
as
should all be public access.
As we've seen in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, he also refused to send disaster relief to certain states based on whether the constituents had voted for him in sufficient numbers.
This
is really a recipe
illegal.
for disaster because in any 4-year period, it's
likely
that
nonpartisan.
weather is going to
It should only be
intensify.
one party then. Like, there should only be one group. It's only USA.
At some
If
speed
it's a country,
under
one
Trump
country.
presidency,
It's only USA. Once the election done,
from the federal government to
that
disasters
party
like
shit
these,
should be
and
thrown
much less
away.
proactively
What does it matter,
spent and
Republican or
invested in
Democrat?
adaptation and
Games,
preparation,
you
which
guys
is
are playing
really
people's
what we
lives.
need. We can't only be rushing to the scene of a disaster after
You
it
all
hits.
pocketed
We need to be able
cash
to prepare those communities,
that's
which is to say
supposed to be
all
left there
American communities
to
ahead of
treat
time for
Indians
what's coming.
that could prove
Asheville
himself
is
in
a
modern times
perfect
through
example of this.
DNA,
FEMA has actually, I think, done a
blood
relatively good job.
quantum,
All of the conspiracy theories
and
notwithstanding.
search and rescue technicians,
A community that is hit
SARTech.
without proliferation
since
is going to be
1984.
devastated.
Worldwide,
That's what
this
it
is
means to
known.
be
How come
living
in
in a
Europe,
world defined by weather
I see
we
the
have
search
not
and rescue
seen for all of
technicians
human history, and
well
that
up,
is the experience
well
that we're
done.
having now. The climate that we're living in now is
Same in some
unprecedented
Asian
in all of human
countries.
history. That means
The United
unprecedented
States is falling
risks,
apart.
unprecedented hazards. We need to be preparing for those ahead of time, as though they are
Prince Henry
unprecedented, not as though they are just
became a
normal
sergeant
weather, which is
before
how
he
many
retired from
on
the
the
army.
Republican side of the aisle want to see them.
Search and rescue technician.
Before Manuel Ivan
That's what I was
Guerrero,
claiming to be.
I wanted
After
to
I was
ask
washed
you
up
in
and being an
Orlando
astronaut
as a
because of my
student
disability. They
at
forgot I was
UCF,
disabled.
if
They went back
these
into the army.
catastrophes, this one
I was told of my
hurricane
liability
Helene
because of
after
my
another
disability.
Milton, following
They had
up on
Ontario
this
disability,
question
said I'm not
around
disabled.
the presidential election,
There are
how
people that
it's
walk
affected
100
young
kilometers a
people
day,
in the swing.
200
I mean, we're
kilometers a
talking
day,
about swing
even
states
run
of
200
North
kilometers a
Carolina,
day.
the key state of Florida.
Disability is a spectrum.
It's
Just because I don't need help every day
disconcerting for
doesn't
young
mean
people. Also, I
I
just
can't
lost
do.
power, if you didn't notice from the lighting.
I
beach.
can do
We just,
what I
like,
want
on
to
air,
do. There's a lot of things I want
it's
to
been
do
very
that I
disconcerting
cannot
to,
do.
lots
I
of
need
young
help from
people
one or
to
two
see,
people to do
and
them.
It's been,
That
it
means I'm
has been very
disabled.
stimulating for
Military
those
determined I'm
conversations. I
disabled.
hear
OPP is
many
wondering
of,
why
the
people that
people
are
on my
disabled
floor who
have to keep
stayed
on
for the hurricane don't
reapplying.
usually talk about
And I'm
the
saying it
election,
right now over
talking
this.
about
I'm just
the
going
way
slow
that this has
because I'm
been
forgetting.
mismanaged and the way that this is
But it is what
so
it is.
concerning. The fact that we had 2 hurricanes
The
in 2 weeks,
disability
and the
is a
way
spectrum.
that it's affected
If I have
our
no
schooling,
cannabis in my
it's affected,
system,
the people
I can't
that we
talk
know
or
and our
walk.
family members that live in
So
Tampa,
therefore,
and all of
I
those
earned the
things.
right to that.
And that's really had people
I earned the right to
conversing
that.
about the election and really talking about the
I
effects of
earned
these
the right
climate
to that.
disasters and the way
Working
it's
since
going
8
to
years
affect
old in this
our
country
communities
that I
and
was
our
born in.
families and our futures.
That French liberals want to tell me that I'm not born in, and that I have to identify as Black African. The World Economic Forum agents, that's what they say I have to identify as. And my blood quantum is 3/4. My blood quantum is 3/4. But they say I have to identify as Black African, white Yankee, Nazi, Zionist. That's what they say. The Coalition of the Willing, the I Don't Give a Fuck Coalition, IDF, I don't give a fuck. I don't give a fuck about anything. We want that land.
Of these hard-hit states, do prisoners, are they protected?
It is what it is. It came out with the flow of the water.
Don't you think it's concerning? The earth is heating up, I mean we're practically burning. Fossil fuels keep on burning. The corporates are earning and earning. The survival of the race comes second place to the profits lining their pockets.
Can't even swim anywhere in the lakes or the oceans freely because of petroleum in the water. Because of petroleum in the water. It's not global warming due to petroleum. It's bad health worldwide due to petroleum.
Well, the polar caps are melting. How many views and likes you are getting?
Do Something by Celia Hapida. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman with Juan Gonzalez. As many as 28,000 people incarcerated in Florida jails and prisons were in the mandatory evacuation zone of Hurricane Milton. But many officials refused to relocate the prisoners and insisted their facilities were safe. Meanwhile, an incarcerated person who was evacuated to a Florida maximum security prison shared their experience last night on social media. Quote, "Power's out in here, and the correctional officers are hiding in their offices while we're left in the dark. We're shouting for news and updates, but no one's listening. Just
When is the
trying to
IDF
hold
going to
on
stop
and
doing what
hope
they're
the
doing to
storm
people?
doesn't
They don't even know who they're killing.
swallow us whole," unquote. For more, we're joined by Jordan
Killing some of their own
Martinez, an
family members,
organizer
don't
with
even
the
realize
Campaign
it, some
to
of
Fight
them.
Toxic Prisons and the group's hurricane and disaster response team.
Killing people just
They
because
helped
they told you
organize
to
pressure
in the
campaigns
name
for
of.
officials to evacuate incarcerated
Fuck
people
you,
during
I
this
won't do
storm,
what they
as they have
told
for
me.
many
I
others.
won't
Welcome
murder
to
people
Democracy
because you
Now!
told me.
It's great to have you with us. Jordan, explain what the situation has been now in Florida
They
for
cut the connection.
prisoners.
Yeah, the ongoing situation, Amy, in
They fully
Florida
cut
has
it.
been one of almost complete neglect and fiction writing by claiming that incarcerated people are in fact being evacuated. The Florida Department of Corrections claims 5,600 almost incarcerated people were evacuated, but in the list of facilities that they released, the vast majority of those evacuated were from camps, halfway houses, work release centers, and in many cases they were evacuated to quote-unquote hardened facilities literally across the street. For example, Lowell Work Camp, which is part of correctional institution, women's prison, that organizers in Florida Change Comes Now have been fighting around various conditions. Lowell Work Camp
I would go out on a limb
dozens of yards
to
away
say Instagram
to
trolls
correctional.
cut
And
my
so we're
feed
seeing this
because they're starting a bit of a
fiction
rage
being
against
raised
Machine
by
Song.
FDOC as well as the county sheriffs. We attempted to help force evacuations in multiple mandatory evacuation zones along the West Coast, and we were able to achieve one evacuation of the Orient Road Jail in Hillsborough County, but Manatee County, Lee County, Pinellas County, as well as St. Johns County on the eastern coast all left prisoners in mandatory evacuation zones in the jails.
And Jordan, you mentioned Pinellas County, the sheriff stated that, quote, it's really not possible to evacuate the jail because of the number of inmates, and he instead moved people to higher floors. Can you talk about that?
Israelis
This is, again, part of
might not be Israelite
fiction that
or Semitic
sheriffs and officials
at all.
in Florida like to spin to project a sense of confidence in the face of conditions that are entirely unpredictable in hurricane situations. For the vast majority of hurricanes that we've organized around, the actually most dangerous portions of the hurricanes are not the immediate storm surges that might flood the first floor of a prison, jail, or detention center. It's actually the aftermath of the days and weeks following, in which water is cut off, access to food is cut off, power is cut off, medical supplies are cut off. And so evacuating people to higher floors when the bottom floor is completely destroyed, that houses the majority of those facilities that keep the entire system running within the prison, that people need to survive their basic living necessities. It can create conditions in which, as has been reported on Democracy Now! Before, people are forced to drink water from the toilet because they have no other access. And we see this again and again and again in disaster situations. And the fact that they are unable to evacuate people in mandatory evacuation zones, I think, goes to show the complete lack of prioritization of the lives of incarcerated people during hurricanes. And I think we can all agree, if we are prioritizing the safety of our communities, those communities must include incarcerated people inside that are themselves organizing on the inside to fight for better conditions, and quite often being forced during hurricanes to prepare to protect their communities via forced slave labor with sandbags or in cleanup in the aftermath.
And Judy, The Intercept reports prisoners in North Carolina were left in their cells without running water or power for nearly a week, cut off from communication with the outside world, and forced to keep their waste in plastic bags in their cells. From Helene, your final comments on what needs to be done.
I think the final comments on what needs to be done is there needs to be mandatory in-place regulations during evacuations when a certain category of hurricane is coming in that require and force state and local county officials to have evacuation plans in preparation in advance. And lastly, I want to close with a quote from inside that we have with Jailhouse Lawyers Speak, who are the folks that reported those inside conditions. And we believe it's very important that incarcerated people are allowed to speak for themselves in these conditions. So this is coming out of the Florida Department of Corrections itself. Jailhouse Lawyers Speak says, "We urge the public to understand our plight as people in jails and prisons. We suffer during natural disasters in locked, dark cells, not knowing if we will survive or not. This is not just a logistical failure, it's a profound moral failing. While entire towns are evacuated and communities band together to seek safety, we remain locked within these walls, treated as less than human. It is heartbreaking to to think that while the world prepares for survival during a pending natural disaster such as Hurricane Milton, we are still treated as if we don't matter, as if our lives can be tossed aside in the name of protocol. We must end this normalized routine. We beg the public to pay attention and have a heart of compassion.
Well, I want to thank you so much for joining us, Jay or Jordan Martinez, an organizer with the Campaign to Fight Toxic Prisons, the group's hurricane and disaster response team. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. As we continue our coverage of Hurricane Milton and its aftermath, we're joined by Gerardo Reyes Chavez, a farm worker organizer with a coalition of Immokalee workers in Southwest Florida, which also runs a radio station called Radio Conciencia, which helped immigrant workers prepare for Hurricane Milton and other storms. He lives in Florida, but is joining us from Las Vegas, where he just landed. If you can place for us Immokalee and talk about what you understand has taken place right now.
Yes, good morning, Amy. Thank you for inviting us. Immokalee is a immigrant community that was created as a labor reserve. And it is also the epicenter for the production of tomatoes, with companies that are based on that area, with production on the entire East Coast. And in Immokalee, we have workers that come from Mexico, Guatemala, Haiti, and other workers from Central America. We are a very vulnerable community that also has been the epicenter of the fight for human rights in the fields for decades. We have been able to establish agreements with 14 major corporations to create some collaboration that has helped us in minimizing some of the vulnerabilities that we have faced for many, many years by working together in moments of crisis like this one.
And if you can also, Gerardo, talk about the radio station. Yesterday we had on the news director of WMNF in Tampa, who was covering Gulfport in Florida. And your radio station, that is so key, these community radio stations, to linking up people and the kind of mutual aid that needs to be done.
Our community radio station has been broadcasting since 2003. And during all of these years, we have had broadcastings in different languages, indigenous languages, and in Spanish, which is the main language that most people speak, also in Creole. And through the radio, we have been communicating all the messages so that people know where to go and what's going on in regards to, in this case, hurricanes. So one of the key things about our community radio station is that its nickname is yours, it's La Tuya, which means it's something that we have created with the community. In fact, the first library we had was donations of music from the community itself. And the participation of the community in the programming is very important, as well as the organizing efforts of the coalition of Immokalee workers that are what makes possible this trust in the information that a community that is so vulnerable needs to hear to be able to then go to the shelters, for example. People follow those instructions, and we know that in many different circumstances, we have been able to direct people and safeguard our community by collaborating with the community also in all of these efforts. So for us, it's a very important tool, and it is a space in which we convey the information that have helped us save lives, no doubt.
And Gerardo, we only have about a minute left. I wanted to ask you about the housing conditions of many of the migrant workers that you deal with. They're usually dilapidated or poorly constructed housing. How are they unduly affected by storms like this?
well, this is always scary for us. Whenever a hurricane hits on our area, it's, as you mentioned, the mobile homes are really, really old. They're not safe places to be. And something that I have seen, is through the agreements that we have established with the Fair Food Program, there has been changes on the housing for workers inside Fair Food Program farms, but sadly the conditions of vulnerability, living conditions especially, are horrible in most agricultural communities. So what we are seeing, it's all the dangers of climate change. Communities like Immokalee across the entire state are suffering more than other communities. So we're still trying to assess.
People that are in the same situation as us are supposed to be allowed here, not people that are making it the same situation for us. Fuck, man. Fucking faggotry, fucking Trudeau.
This time we were lucky that he didn't hit us.
People with the Sky are the fake ones, fucking.
We know that other communities are
except Chris Sky. It seems.
That are in a desperate
You gotta be
situation
Sky.
right now. So we will be
Sky.
taking steps to try to support them as
Not
much
Polish,
as we can.
Nazi.
And as we wrap up, we have 5 seconds, but the major
I wasn't
the
even listening
countries
to
where
the
so many of the farm workers come from,
friggin'
Haiti, in
get
your
off on
area in
Instagram.
Immokalee, Haiti, Mexico,
Found something I wouldn't have found.
Yeah.
and Guatemala. Gerardo Reyes Chavez, a farm worker, senior staff member, organizer at the Coalition of Immokalee Workers in Southwest Florida, which also runs a radio station called
But I will be
Radio
making a comment
Cosensia,
definitely
which helps
about
immigrant
farm
workers
workers,
prepare
migrants,
for
how they,
hurricanes. I'm
how
Amy
they should
Goodman with
be
Juan
more
Gonzalez for
so
another
have
edition of Democracy
citizenship
Now!
than more other people's, more so other people.
From the roots up.
Oh yeah, that
CIUT
is it.
89.5 FM.
It is at its end.
Toronto.
So I will start on the farm workers.
Person who took the loan was able to call the bank.
So this time it seems like we get enriched, lucky, gifted, bared, Funky Friday in the background, since I don't have Instagram on live broadcasting because they cut my broadcast. So here I am in my orange La Costa shirt. My grandfather, as far as I recall, passed away in 1982. He'd say back in 1979 to early 1980s that the person that came out in La Costa is American indigenous. A lot of people that the news is calling African American are American indigenous. Let me start with something because a lot of people say things and they don't know a lot. I heard the term jungle music, and jungle music is automatically associated with Africa for some reason. Oh, sheesh, get out of here, not this, not this. I'm just gonna play a song here. This is considered jungle music, or the sounds of jungle music. It's in reverse when I show you the name here, because of course I have everything on the backwards image. Oh, she's sorry. Ah. Ay, ay. The sound of the woo, Sioux Indian. A lot of them are descended from Mayan. But some people don't want to believe that. Seems Mohawk and Algonquin. But some people don't want to believe that. Even though it seems like maybe, I haven't seen it yet for sure, that the Mayan X might be carved north of here. And if it is, that's definite proof the Mayans were right across the Americas, or what some people call the Olmec. Some people were wondering why some people were so good at the moon calendar. The migrant farmers. I have a cousin. I did a DNA test on him. He came back showing at least one tribe in his DNA. I think it was not any of the three my dad has or one that I have. There's Mohawk, Nipmuc, Cree, Sioux, and Algonquin in my bloodline. Oral history would have more. But because white Yankee United States and their revisionist history after the Reconstruction era, during the Civil War or Civil Rights era, language erosion, time erosion, memory erosion. If you lose your birth language, the language your mother taught you, do you understand numbers the same? Do you remember? Can you shout them off? 1, 2, 3, like that? Unless you're very gifted in a language that you speak and good at math, you lose time easily. Days go by. Someone tried to convince some people that they were thousands of years old when they were young, toddlers. Some people are in a trap like that still. I was in a trap like that before. From people calling me names they shouldn't have. People that I shouldn't even have met. Going to schools that shouldn't even have been built. Beyond 1985 Common Era. Beyond 1985 Common Era. I would not be speaking English right now if Pierre Elliott Trudeau did not trick Queen Elizabeth II, as she's called in the English media. They count time by Ragnall time, which means every person that's born counts how old they are. And when the next High Lord ascends, they know their time based on their birth order calendar. Not necessarily this common era calendar, because the world was switched up in the last 100 years. Roadrunner would say 100 years passed in one day. I can't verify that, I'm only 56. I feel the 1930s jumped to 1974 or 75. I cannot prove that. I cannot prove that. All I know is I'm 56, no longer. I could prove that to myself by my memories and my family members' memories. Family members that the WEF agents wanted to separate us from. They wanted me to acknowledge the kidnapper as my father. They wanted me to be away from my parents protecting me because I needed protection because of what happened to me under 10 years old. And I'm born with a disability that would be very prominent and seen well if I didn't smoke at least 3.5 grams of cannabis a day since I was in the Army Reserve. And a lot of them know that. A lot of them know what's going on. A lot of them know what the deal is. The ones sergeant and higher that know who I am. They've seen us desecrated by people, as one of my buddies put it, the coalition of the willing. So now back to the farmers. That was jungle music. That was Central American music in Nahuatl, the water language, the water talk. One of the bloodlines, my mom's side, not necessarily my father's side. So I'll go back to the farm workers. For time immemorial, across the Americas, migrants have been moving corn from South America, Peru, all the way up to this great region, Ontario and further north. In order for corn to grow and other things to grow, you need temperatures of a certain amount, a certain time. You need a certain length of growing season. This is well known. The earth is warming, they say. Some people want to blame petroleum use as global warming, all man's fault. We got to change all the combustion vehicles to lithium ion, electric vehicles, hogwash, BS, like Tyson says, bologna sandwich. I can't broadcast this as kids. I already said F earlier, but over 13, yeah. We want the world to be educated, not diseducated, not uneducated. Just because if you speak French and you hear the sound depopulation, that does not mean in English it means to depopulate. Isn't that of population or the population? I know it's not in population. That'll be in population. Of population. There's no reason to depopulate the earth of humans. There is a reason for humanity, especially the ones that are excessive, to clean up their act. There's no reason for United Nations to make a mandate that says everybody can only buy 3 items of clothes a year. If anybody only had 3 items of clothes per year, everybody would be naked eventually. If I only had 3 items of clothes, my boots are already gone. Pants are already ripped. Shirts are already ripped. I gotta either repair them or burn them as they used to, so they don't end up into the land. Some things, if they cannot be recycled, it is better to burn it so it doesn't end up into the land, into the system, into the food chain. Smaller animals that cannot make that decision, that do not know not to eat that might not be thinking, that's plastic, I can't eat it, it's not going to digest. We don't need the New World Order to limit humans' ability to live and thrive. We needed them to be more equitable in how they live with everybody else. Instead of living 1,000 times what I live, why don't they live more like just 10 times than I live? They are excessive, in excess was part of an operation to remind the youth of today that was being manipulated by former Nazis that changed their coats and clothes into whatever they desire to get what they want, that the world is falling apart. In excess. Joy Division. I listened to a group called Joy Division. I didn't listen to them because I was a Nazi, part of the Nazi Joy Division agenda, Hitler, orphans to take control of the world. So say they. So as we see. No, the Joy Division group leader, singer, Bernard Sumner, he had epilepsy. They named the group so they remember, look, Nazis wanted to kill people like us. Every day we remember that. We're not going to forget that kind of stuff. Never. It's right there in our face every day. We know that. Every day. Joy Division, Nazi Joy Divisions. Yeah, they're freaking breeding an army of orphans. They want to kill off people that are undesirable to them. That's why I like Joy Division songs. Especially atmosphere. Especially being a two-spirit, real two-spirit. Not what the media push. I'm not too gendered. I'm not too sex. I don't want to transform my gender. I don't want anybody to transform the gender. We wanted the practice of eunuchism, where people get castrated to work for somebody else, to stop. In the 1970s, I can recall that. But somehow, since the term lost girls and boys transported, made in the early 70s was made up, related to former forced labor, enslavement, suffrage, plantation, sugarcane plantation, sugar plantations, all kinds of plantations that existed across white Yankee territory. In a 20-year period, it got switched. And I was being manipulated by someone that sexually assaulted me and brainwashed me in the 80s to believe it meant lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender by 1990. Roots Canada would say it meant lost girls, boys, transported against their will. Lost girls and boys transported quietly against their will to be sexually exploited by sexual exploiters that took our language up here and took words from our language and switched them to abuse us with language. And they're still doing it with English, because English is a Deutsch-based language, Dutch-based language with Greek and Latin concepts, with Latin law in the United States. Where to define me, person that look like me, I'm black, associated with sub-Saharan Africa. If I came from Egypt and migrated to North America as an Egyptian bloodline, Egyptian thing, pass a test, I could be documented as white, being this complexion, because I'm not sub-Saharan African. Does that make sense? Black and white doesn't make anything sense. Black and white splits up cultures, heritage, families, into colorism, into foolishness, psychopathy. Especially if the origin of the word black is bleak in the language it is inherent that we all speak. Water has no color. It's transparent. So the concept of spirit cannot be associated with white. It's transparent. Black is the absence of light. They say, no, it's not. Dark is the absence of light. Just because you close your eyes and you want to call that color black doesn't mean it matches the concept, especially when that concept is being used to say it's associated with someone's skin. That is incorrect. So now back to the migrant farmers. So everyone I know is West Indian, being told they're African. By Nazis that were paper-clipped into many governments. And it seems the Zionists are same as Nazis. check their DNA. Are they Semitic genetically? Or are they just throwing that word anti-Semitism to have people stop because they don't know what it means? Oh, you're anti-Semite. I can't argue against that. I don't know what it means. You're racist. Oh, I can't argue against that. It's fishy. What's the meaning? But if I said you're a violinist or a pianist, you know that I'm a violinist, a violinist. So ist means enthusiast. Communist, community enthusiast. Communism, community enthusiasm. North America, many tribes were commune. We shared amongst our people. Though they had a leader, because the person closest to the family, that was a central family that kept the information, obviously they're inside the house, they know a little bit more than the families that have drifted off the center. But they still take care of their people. That's what Queen Elizabeth was trying to establish with the Commonwealth and make the world better in this modern age. But bad English and a Frenchman agenda that is like the Matrix movie has us in this stuck world where treaty rights are being disrespected by, as the Queen put it, a political trick that has been going on since politics rose in Britain. The treaties are not treated right worldwide because the politicians are screwing around and have the leaders of different cultures hands tied. When they say royal assent, it means the Queen has nothing and cannot say it. She can't even veto it. And now King Charles can't even veto it. It's basically like they are forced laborers for the government that took over their land. Real talk. Real talk. Because if Queen Elizabeth wanted to do what she was going to do in the 70s, Canada would have been more like former Hindustan, which in a trick changed its name to India, thinking it could change its name to India and disregard treaty rights for Indian territory and British North America, while American Indians were being forced to learn French or English and not allowed to learn their own languages or speak the languages they'd already known up to a certain age. Some people were so young looking, like if I shave off my beard, someone might beat me up, tell me I'm 18, say I gotta go to school again and get re-educated. Bang, all of a sudden my ID's 18. I'm freaking learning what they tell me, and I have gray hair, but I look young. People, yeah, he's a young guy with gray hair. Yeah, one of the young guys with gray hair. No, bullshit. The police were looking for people like that in the 90s. Saying there was a lot of people going to the school of 16-year-olds that were 50 or 40, pretending to be 16 because they get away with it because they're short. I'm 5'11". I can't get away with being 4'9", looking 18-year-old. I think Puff Daddy's older than me. I think Trudeau is older than me. I think Obama's older than me, all of them by 20 years. I probably have a list of 200 people that sexually assaulted me in the 70s. I don't fucking care no more. I'm saying it out. I probably have a list to remember of over 200 people I witnessed sexually assault people and sexually assault me in the 70s when I was being run by what some called immortal sex cults. Malachi York, the name is so familiar maybe in hip hop. It's like, Malachi York sounds familiar. I don't know if he was a patsy for bigger fish, like Epstein and Puffy and Jay-Z. And Weinstein, and maybe even Biden. Biden was never supposed to be the protest for the United States. That was a warning sign to me in 1984 to all of us that no, the seers, if Biden becomes president, the deep state immortal sex cult took over the world. That's what I recall from 1984. Every single president since Reagan might have been installed by the immortal sex cult, except one. You figure it out. Now let me go back to the migrants I was talking about. Since the 70s, Pierre Elliott Trudeau was supposed to correct the mistake he made and make sure the West Indians that are from the Great Lake region, especially from Canada, got citizenship. His son's prime minister now. And instead of taking care of the UK, United Kingdom, former colonies, the West Indians, that are neglected, exiled from their country by his father, he has been helping plausible Nazis in the Ukraine. So then back to the farm workers. Many migrant farmers that come to Canada and in the United States to work on farms, if they're not obviously Chinese and they identify as black or West Indian, they're most likely American Indian, or American Indian mixed with possible African or Asian or European. Search and rescue technicians, SARTech. That's something I trained to be, that I wanted to be. I think the most I could be as a SARTech is maybe just the person that checks to see if their uniform's okay before they jump out, and that's it. Or check to see if their uniform's okay on the ground, not carry nothing. That's the most I could do. Maybe push a pencil, and that's it. According to people that know. So, SARTech is not related to global warming. Regardless of global warming happening or not happening, you always need emergency management technicians. And when I say emergency management technicians, I mean if a storm happens, you need people there that could know what to do when the storm comes. Over the last 50 years, vehicles were supposed to be designed for region. Designed for region. Not designed to make, as they call it, profit, which is really financial gain. Because you see, the word prophecy from the Greek, which came in from the older languages, the Semitic languages, means to see into the future. So they take the concept of seeing into the future and apply it to their money when we're talking about seeing into the future as in the dreams, not calculating. Because some people are financially profiting by doing fishy math. Economics does not fit to scientific math. It's the math that doesn't make sense. So it's not a science. It's an art used to manipulate numbers to steal cash. Acapulco was hit twice by Hurricane Otis and Typhoon, the Hurricane Otis last year and Hurricane Milton this year. It's awkward that the hurricane this year, Milton, started where it started. It started near the Olmec region of Mexico and hit an area of land that no one was supposed to be living in. Florida Keys, Florida Everglades. No one was supposed to build on the Everglades at all. The Everglades were supposed to stay there. They weren't supposed to drain the Everglades and build on it. I've been saying for weeks that the hurricane was going to hit places that no one was supposed to live. And it did. It hit exactly two places that no one was supposed to live, where people think they are good living, that they're not. The Appalachians and the Everglades. Hills and valleys are totally different than living on a mountaintop. I had this guy complaining that, oh, it's not possible to flood in the Appalachians. The people flooded in the Appalachians. We're global weather. They're using weather control modification. They're not. They're not. I've seen what happens in hills and valleys. Ontario has a lot of area that has hills and valleys. And I see if you're on top of a big enough hill and when it rains heavy and during things, Toronto gets floods a lot, often enough. They got a flood earlier this year when Don Valley Park was flooded. Valleys get flooded, the hilltops are safe. That's just how it is. If you get too much rain, it stays. The Rouge Park in Toronto, Scarborough area, southern part of the Scarborough. Yeah, I'm starting to lose my voice. I'm gonna have to take a whistle again, a bowl here. Yeah, the bottom southern part of Scarborough, the Rouge Park there, it had flooded years ago. It was closed all summer that year when it flooded. I'd say maybe 15, 20 feet. The mouth of the Rouge was that year higher to that point. The pinch point there, so that whole year, the Lake Ontario was high too. Then there's another year, me and my buddies walked down what's called Colonel Danforth Trail there, the one that's connected to U of T's military trail, park trail. And we walked down into the valley, like to drive, and let me tell you the drive in there. First of all, when you enter the park, it's a steep hill, probably drops a good 40, 50 feet down to where the bridge is. And then there's a bridge, the bridge is over the river. The river is maybe a good 15 feet below the bridge, right? And you drive a little bit further to the parking lot area. I say the parking lot area is a good 13 to 15 feet above the river or so. We had went down one year and we had seen evidence that there was fish all the way into the forest beyond the park trail. And we had touched the trees. Me and my buddy Dave, his wife and the family were with him when we took this walk. We had touched the trees, and the trees were wet to that high, soaked. And over the years, you can see some of the trees in that same park. Over the next 3 or 4 years, they started flopping over in that. So no one can't tell me that valleys do not flood when they get more than heavy rain. That region, our ancestors had told them only build in certain areas of that region. They didn't listen to us. There's a book by Sun Bear and Sun Bear, Brighter Days, Darker. It's by Sun Bear. I can't remember the exact title right now. I'll find it and post it in the post. Talking about areas of North America, or in general, because of the shifting of the planets throughout the solar system and coronal mass ejections, and we're moving through a denser part of the galaxy right now. As my grandfather was explaining it back in the 70s, there's more moisture and energy in the atmosphere, and that is not believed by the science people, but being tested and verified by polyscientists throughout the earth that are doing their science, as opposed to the politicians that are preaching the science. So yeah, it's a lot of information going through my head right now. It's like whew. So last week, a massive coronal mass ejection came off the sun, hitting the maximum value they have for coronal mass ejections right now. It's too much information. G4, and it hit Earth. It intensified Hurricane Milton within 24 hours. But the global news networks are saying that it intensified because of global warming. Can the global news networks show that the ocean in that area, in the 24-hour period, the ocean temperature rose by a degree that would make sense that the hurricane got bigger? Or does the geomagnetic storm that humanity has been fearmongered about, thinking it causes destruction on Earth, when we tried to explain in the 1990s to a lot of these entertainer people that it just causes severe weather on Earth? And you always have to be prepared for geomagnetic storms with your SARTECs, search and rescue technicians. Always have to be ready for when a severe geomagnetic storm hits Earth. Now, if anybody's seen the Aurora Borealis or Aurora Australis in areas they have not ever seen them before, this is part of the signs that it is the sun that is affecting our weather more than the petroleum use. Rastafari had said he wants Africa to be developed like he saw Germany was when he had went there, and other places in Europe, and other places in North America, and other places around the world. China, in the last 40 years, has went from underdevelopment to having many cities that are at par sometimes with cities in Europe and the Americas, North America. Humanity should thrive, not be cullened by the World Economic Forum. There's a big difference between humans taking care of the planet and a wealthy few living excessively, destroying the planet while blaming the masses of people that work hard for everything they have, while they work very little and are given things to promote things that shouldn't be promoted. It is what it is. I'll call it out like I call it out, because I can remember my cousin telling me, my shorter cousin, which is definitely at least 10 years older than me, telling me, gay does not mean what you say or they say in our language or many languages. And I can remember him being upset at me when I believed that LGBT in 1990 meant lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. Or trans. It wasn't transgender, it was just trans. Like trans what? Trans whoa. Trans what? What do you mean trans? What's trans? That transvestite thing is only since 1973. That was the first surgery ever done on an American, a mixed American indigenous person with a mixed European person. Everybody that went to residential school had to be mixed European and Christian. This is one fact they don't say on the news. Everybody that went to residential school is mixed European and Christian. I wonder sometime if some of the people claiming they are American status Indian from the residential school system are American Indian, or other people of diaspora that of European descent mix. It is what it is. So Florida and the Appalachians, according to Sunbear and Wobbin, I don't know. Yeah, I have this phone. I could look it up right here. Forgot. I could show you the name of the book. There it is. Black dawn, bright day, sun bear with wobbin wind, not wobbin moon. I read that book a few times, and my mom read it too. I also read Celestine Prophecies. I wouldn't say that one is as real. There's things in that I am skeptical of, or so. But the thing that we were both interested in, the Celestial Prophecies, is that my mom is Incan descent as well as Mayan, supposedly. But people want to freaking spit on that. People that it seems shouldn't be here and are influencing the government way more than they should. I wonder sometimes, are all Punjabi ethnic, or some Punjabi took words from a language and are using them to keep on doing something? Because Pun could mean Punani, as in vagina, and jab could mean like hit, like have sex. So I wonder sometimes if there's an immortal sex cult in Canada related to the term Punjabi, hiding behind the image of sheiks, which is the religion, spiritual path, as opposed to Punjabi. Sikhism and Punjabi culture. A Sikh, or the real ethnic Bharatian of a certain type that is being invasive in the English language with people that don't know nothing about their culture. I know a little bit. I don't know everything. Nobody knows everything. I keep on telling that to everybody, but people want to make it assume like I know everything. I got to be the immortal God. That's what they're trying to put in my head. I know everything. I'm the God. They're all my children. Every single person that Mother Teresa is my child somehow. They're not. Idiots. Idiots, all of them. Just like Obi-Wan was saying, got to get you out of Malvern's bullshit they programmed into your brain over those 3 years at that red brick school that should have never been built. Just like a tin can should have never been built. Just like probably St. Barnabas and St. Columba should have never been built. All the illegal schools, all could be said to be same as residential school, day schools. All of them, the whole Malvern, every school in there. Climate change debate. That is really needed at a high scientific level. No politicians involved at all in the debate. Because I see some of these scientists on TV. They look like they cannot say what they want to say. What I heard Stephen Hawking say in his chat to to Neil deGrasse Tyson, it's like, you kind of said that Big Bang is fake, but didn't. And at the same time said there's no balance to the universe, but you're not saying it like they want you to, but you're saying it in a way that they'll accept it. I think I went for everything. I went for the farm workers, I went for search and rescue technologists, evacuations, I wonder if that's it. I wonder if the name for Apocalypto came from freaking Acapulco getting freaking hurricane getting devastated from hurricanes 2 years ago, and us seers talking about it in the 70s and 80s. You don't know when it happens, but it happens in the future. Yeah. In the early 90s, there were people, they've never told me crap, like things that make me upset or so, like they're not the ones that were freaking harassing me and terrorizing me. There's quite a few people that came from Pacific islands and Indian Ocean islands thanking me for getting into this country because something's supposed to happen on a specific day in 2004. It happened on that specific day. I totally forgot a prediction was like that was even made, because I think I was living at the house I was supposed to, and my uncle that was living at the house he was supposed to was monitoring what was going on with me. We were watching Space Channel, local Shaw or Rogers Space Channel, the only space channel they have in Toronto. And at the exact moment that earthquake happened, Banda Aceh, Indian Ocean earthquake, 2004, December 26th, their calendar, me and my uncle looked at the North Star, then I looked at him, and he looked the scariest I've ever seen him in his whole life. And then he said something strange about that I have to go to bed and stay there soon or whatever. And the next morning I woke up, I was hearing voices in my head I never heard. I was hearing Hindi. I was hearing language I never heard. I started learning Hindi over the next few years. 2005, 2006. Kept on working at Canada Post even though I broke my back, because something happened to me in my chamber room in that 536 house that shouldn't have happened. And after it happened, my brother said to me I should lock my door. And I found that strange to me, because I've never had to lock my room door in this house since we moved in 1989, with my mom and dad coming there to make sure I was safe, and you, my younger brother, living there. I've never had to lock it. Well, something strange happened, I know. And then I was questioning about a Janice. I know it ain't Janice Jerome. Now I know it ain't Janice Jerome, because the ghost got me to ask someone that would have known, and I got the answer out of the girl without her knowing. That's what the ghost wanted to know. So if Big L or whoever that girl wanted to know who Janice is, definitely wasn't Janice Jerome. I don't know what Janice's name looked like. I don't even know what she looks like. I just know it was a girl named Janice that was in the house within that period of time. And something strange happened after I went to sleep. And from then, my brother told me, she's locked in your room door. She's like, you know, and from then I know, I didn't go to know what they call hospital. In Latin, the word term hospitalis became hospital, hostel, hospitality, and hotel in English. But that term hospitalis, from how it was conveyed to me and my uncle, means home, domicile, where you live with your family. My brother was born at home. Some people try to say I was born in a tent. I don't know about that. I've seen a tent. It kind of brings back memory, but the memories are still very, very foggy. If I was born in a teepee right here near the Reeds, I can't remember that, but I know I was born in 1968 for sure, and I know it was in Canada. I know the freaking liberal Frenchmen that control the Matrix, with their document discovery still around the world. They haven't apologized to the whole world for the document discovery. They apologized to the Assembly of First Nation in Canada. But I haven't seen the Pope Francis say, world, humanity, we apologize to the whole planet for the document of discovery. It apparently still affecting the whole planet. Because white Zionists think they gotta kill every person that is not white or like them. And Zionists was created by Christians that converted to Judaism. So they're not Jews, they're Jewish. Are they actually Israelite? Or are they a conspiracy, a cabal of infiltrators to infiltrate everybody's culture, to disassociate them from their culture, to force a one world government? That's what we want to know.